Hello and welcome to our first virtual Women's Empowerment Tour. We are joining communities all across North America today to celebrate Mother's Day and bringing forward incredible women within your local community. We're going to be sharing these women's incredible stories and then joining together in a panel discussion to talk about equality, diversity, and the importance of empowering and inspiring everyone to enjoy the outdoors. Thanks to our partners Arc'teryx, we're able to bring this event into your homes today on Mother's Day. Before we dive into hearing these incredible speakers, I want to tell you a little bit about who the Lady Alliance is, what we're about, and why we're here today. The Lady Alliance started out actually as my own personal Instagram account if you scroll way down into the boonies. It was this incredible experience where I was able to convert a school bus and travel on the road, surfing and climbing for almost a year straight. This was my second solo trip as a young woman. During these adventures, the thing that I heard the most frequent was that I was brave for a girl. It was awful to hear that. I mean, why couldn't I have just been brave and stopped? You know, I had to have been brave for a girl because I was traveling alone. And I thought that that was just so unfair. Why did for a girl need to be added to that? When I came home from my bus trip, I converted my account to the Lady Alliance with this goal of uniting ladies all around to show us how brave we truly are. I was hoping to bring forward these women's groups and women's adventures and women's nonprofits to show all of the good work that women are doing and all of the incredible trips that they are brave enough to enjoy. So fast forward a few years down the road, and we've gone all over the world with different retreats, adventures, we've taught navigation courses, we've sponsored women to become guides, and now we're here with our Women's Empowerment Tour. Arc'teryx came on board in 2019 to put together our first tour. We went to 16 different locations across Canada and the United States, bringing in incredible women to help empower our local communities. Since we can't have that option now with COVID, we've decided that we want to join you virtually for this incredible tour right here in your own home. So that's how this Women's Empowerment Tour was born. We're a collective of women aiming to build confidence and community through adventure. And we want to help inspire and empower you and your local community to do the same. Thank you for joining us in our local chapter, and we cannot wait until the day that we get to adventure together again. But until then, here's our virtual Women's Empowerment Tour. So let's begin.
Denise's ability to grow and maintain a successful business despite the many setbacks and struggles throughout her life inspired her to write Pray for Rain, a guide to building your business with little to no money. In her debut, she opens up about being raised by her grandmother, having little to start with, growing her faith, and ultimately building a business with limited resources. We're going to bring Denise Chavers forward to discuss Pray for Rain.
Yes, my name is Denise Lewis. I am an author of Pray for Rain, a guide to building your business with little to no money. I was raised in Trenton, New Jersey by my grandmother, who had custody of me since I was 2 years old. So I come from one of those backgrounds where there wasn't a lot of money in the house. My grandmother wasn't teaching me about financial freedom. She wasn't teaching me about going to college to get a good education or anything like that. She was just really trying to get by. And so it was really on me to kind of figure out what I wanted to do with myself and what I wanted to do with my life. And I decided at a really early age, when I was 14, that I wanted to be a millionaire. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to find a way to break like generational curses from my family. I wanted to move forward and not have to struggle so much and, for my kids and my kids' kids. So what I did at the age of 14, I changed my birth certificate to say I was 16 so that I could get a job. And I started working full time, saving money, just trying to build stuff for college, because my grandmother had told me she didn't know how I was going to get to college. So I started saving money for college, but I was really focused on just being better, having a good education. So I ended up getting a full scholarship to go to Keene University, which is where I graduated from with a bachelor's degree in business management. And I graduated at the early age of 16. So I started college at 16 as well. And it was really great for me to just have that head start because I was able to see that there was so much more that I needed to do to get where I wanted to be. And that was like to be successful. So while I was in college, I had this whole issue with my hair because I love color. I went to somebody in Union City and they lightened me too many times. So when I went to get a relaxer 4 months later, all my hair fell out down to the new growth. I had about an inch of hair and I was really devastated because losing your hair from something like that, which wasn't kind of expected, really devastated me. And there was no salon that was showing me how to grow my hair back, to tell me what happened. So from there, from going through that whole experience, I decided that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to own a salon. And I just started researching. I started looking up what was needed for me to own this salon. And so I went to cosmetology school. Right after college, I went to cosmetology school, got my cosmetology license. During that time, I was also interested in real estate because I started researching and seeing that, in order for you to really have land and to build a legacy for yourself, for your family, real estate is really important. So I went and got my real estate license while I was in college, and then I graduated from Keene University. And from there, I got my cosmetology license, of course, and then I started working on my business plan. And it took me a really long time to get my salon open because I didn't have the funding, of course, like I said, and I didn't have any savings. I had just experienced a bankruptcy. And so my credit wasn't good. I didn't have anything to really be able to start my business. So it took me about 8 years of just doing out of the box thinking, crowdfunding campaigns, just trying different things to get my business started. And I decided I wanted to be a niche. I didn't want to just open up a salon. So my salon, which is open to this day, is called Sheer Bliss Hair Lounge and Spa. Been open for 5 years now, and it caters to women who suffer from cancer, lupus, alopecia, or some form of traumatic hair loss. So I took that whole experience of me losing my own hair to say, okay, I want to put something back out in the world that's going to help people like myself deal with what do you do if your hair falls out. And then when I was researching it, I realized that women lose their hair for all these other reasons, different health reasons, stress, could be pregnancy, all types of things. But there was not a lot of salons out there that was talking about how to grow your hair back. And so I wanted my business to be different, and I set out to do that. So my salon has private rooms. My salon allows me to be able to accept health insurance for women who do have cancer or lupus or alopecia. A lot of people don't know that your insurance can cover the cost of wig units for you if you can't afford it, or just if you've been to the doctor and you've been diagnosed with any one of those illnesses, they already know it's associated with hair loss. So now I can accept health insurance. I have private rooms. I have all natural products that help women to kind of grow their hair back. And it's been a really tumultuous journey for me to get going with everything. And in that experience of building a salon with little to no money, growing my staff, growing my my clientele and all that stuff, I went through so much. There were many times when I tried to go to other businesses to get advice, to get mentorship on what to do, because you just don't know how to effectively do something if it's your first time. And I got a lot of women who turned me away. A lot of people who were not willing to talk to me and give me advice because they saw me as competition. And that's what inspired me to write my book, because I wanted to put something back into the universe that helped me, that would have helped me had I had that same opportunity. So the book that I wrote, which is here, Pray for Rain, it talks about my journey. It talks about how I got started with my salon, how I was able to raise the funding that I needed to get the salon up and running. It talks about just, my faith and my background of being spiritual and kind of leaning on God to make things happen for me. All throughout my life, it's always been really the unsure, the unknown of how am I going to get to college? How am I going to get my salon open? How I'm going to do this and that? And so many setbacks. A lot of times people in my community and that come from urban areas, we think that there is nothing out there, or, we think that we're not good enough or capable of being able to be successful because we don't come from financial backgrounds. We don't have the money to get started on businesses. We don't have the money to buy real estate. And it's always a struggle. And I wanted to be able to show people that no matter what, no matter where you come from, you can start a business, you can be successful, you can grow it from nothing. And I wrote the book, and the book was just meant to write. Like my only goal was just to write the book, to get it out there so that I could give information, resources on what people can do if they wanted to start a business. But it turned into so much more, just from people hearing my story, from reading the book, from, me just speaking at schools and all these things. It turned into me being more like a motivational speaker. So now that's what I do mainly, is I go to different places, colleges, universities, schools, empowerment events, and I talk about business, and I talk about how important it is to have a business plan, which was really important for me because that's one of the ways I was able to get my business funded. I went to a non-conventional lender that's a nonprofit association, and they give loans based on your business plan and not your credit score. And a lot of people don't know that. A lot of entrepreneurs don't know that there are places that will give you money if you just have a plan in place, if you just know where you're going and you've taken the time to write it out, and you are making yourself accountable for what you say you want to do when you say you want to do it. And my business plan was one of my biggest assets when I was getting my business started. Just having that document allowed me to be able to be in rooms that I didn't think I could be in, and to get funding and money that I didn't think I could get. So I talk to people about that. I talk to people about how important it is to tap into your faith, to tap into what you believe in your heart of hearts, because, at the end of the day, we all have struggles, we all have setbacks and things like that, but it's all about how you handle it and how you allow yourself to go forward, or if you allow yourself to fall into those cracks. So that's the reason why it's called Pray for Rain, because what I'm saying in the book is that, don't focus on the rain. There's going to be rain. There's going to be bad times. And the only thing that gets you from one thing to the next are those adverse times in your life. You're not remembered by the things that we say. We're not known for the things that we say, or believed by the things that we say. We are only believed and trusted by the things that we've been through, the things that we've been able to overcome, the things that would have drowned other people, that allowed us to kind of to float in. So that's what the book is about. And the salon goes hand in hand with helping women and helping children as well who are experiencing hair loss. And now I've taken it a step further, and I have became a real estate investor, because my whole goal is to show women that we can do anything. We can be multitaskers, and we can have it all. We can have a business, we can have real estate, we can be our own boss, and we can be parents and wives and have a family, which, I have 2 kids. I just had a baby who's only 10 months old. And I was pretty much doing everything all simultaneously. It's not easy in this world as women to do everything that you want to do, because we have so many responsibilities on us. But, I try to show women that and encourage them to do whatever their dreams are. If you want to write that book, if you want to own that business, if you want to buy that house, whatever it is that you want to do, you can do it, and you can do it effectively. So, that's part of what my book is about. It's meant to inspire people. It's meant to kind of push them past their limits and teach them to kind of go for whatever it is that they desire to do. And then the other thing that I've done just this past year or two, rather, is I've started an organization called Ladies Building the Legacy with a co-founder of mine. And now what that is basically helping women, setting up a group of women who come together. And once a year, we come together at an annual event. But, all year round, we're sharing ideas, we're sharing information with each other about how we can be better, how we can network, and how I can collaborate with this person and collaborate with that person to build something bigger. Again, one of the things that I've experienced is that we don't come together a lot of times. Men do a lot of things together. They have groups and organizations and all these things to support each other, but sometimes women fall short of that. So I started Ladies Building a Legacy to stop all that, and it also to kind of merge each other together with information about how we can build our own legacies and break generational bondage and generational curses and start to change things for the better. So I'm really excited about everything that I've been doing, the work that I've been doing, because I see that it's starting to change things for myself. It's making me feel a lot better about just the things that I've gone through and where I've come from. So now I know that I can continue on with what I'm doing. And that's pretty much it, with the salon and with the business and with the book and the family and all of that. It's just a lot of stuff that I have to do, but I love it, and I want to show women that we all can do it as well.
Our next speaker is Kate Pearson. Kate is the host of the Apple Podcast top-rated show, She's Hungry, helping listeners hone their power, take ownership of their life, and get to the core of their truth. Today, we're talking to Kate about community, growth, and She's Hungry Co.
I am extremely excited to be here. I'm excited because it's such a great opportunity right now, especially more than ever. I'm a huge proponent for community. That's why She's Hungry was created. But it's been so cool to watch people really step up and take advantage of this opportunity. That really what I want to talk about today. Before I get into that and tell you a little bit about me, is that this opportunity for dropping into our intuition and really getting clear on what it is that we want for our life, and how it is that post all of these things that are all of this newness, all of this new opportunity of things that are going on, how we really want to show up in that place. And for me, so yes, I'm Kate. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I am the founder of She's Hungry, and it was created because I moved out here to Portland 4 years ago from Pennsylvania, very much like Carrie. I just packed 2 bags, booked a flight, didn't know a single person when I got here, and was just like, I want to be a food photographer. I studied photography in college, and I grew up in an Italian family, so food has always been a huge, obviously, component of my life. And my family constantly jokes that, of course, I would find a way to get paid essentially to eat food. So that was duh, of course I would. I'm a very ambitious and driven woman. So it was cool because while I was studying it in college, I also became deeply kind of interested in psychology and human behavior and what kind of brings us together. And food became so glaringly obvious when I started doing a documentary piece on the homeless population in Pittsburgh, that there was this divide and kind of this barrier between getting authentic story and authentic connection between me as the documenter and these communities that I wanted so deeply to understand more about. There was a disconnect up until on Sunday, while I was taking photos and kind of getting to know these people, where they would, I don't really remember, I don't think the bridge specifically, but they would take a barrel, they would light it on fire, and no matter who had a quarrel, who was arguing, who didn't get along with you, no matter what they kind of collected as their resources during that week, on Sunday they would come together and they would share it amongst each other. And that for me struck me, because I'm my family does Sunday dinner every week too, and we are all the same. And at that moment it went from food is the bridge that connects us all, but it is what connects our humanity together. And that opens the doors for so many bigger conversations to be had. And I kind of just like took that concept and ran with it. It was like, this is the gateway that allows me to have deeper, bigger, vulnerable, honest conversations with, I mean, frankly, anyone, as long as you kind of obviously can bridge the gap, because when you get into that place of vulnerability with the conversation around food, I mean, you can't just like go to a bar or like go to a networking event or something like that and jump into, so what do you really want to do with your life, and what makes you so passionate, and why are you not going after it? Like, that's not really a way where a lot of people are like super excited to talk to you. But everybody, when you say, hey, like, what's your favorite restaurant, especially here in Portland, which is where I'm located, everybody has a restaurant that they're loving, a restaurant they want to try, a food that they're loving lately. So that conversation and that connection brought up an opportunity to then connect on a deeper level, but starting out with the conversation about food. But when I got out here, I was so gung-ho about meeting people with the same passion, with the same motivation, with the same drive to connect. I started going to all of these networking events and was met head on with something that felt so hollow and transactional. And I couldn't understand why every conversation I had necessarily at these networking events was so like about referrals or about business cards or about just investing in this course or this coaching program or this thing. And I ended up, after a period of time, feeling like I didn't belong, like I wasn't worth anything if I couldn't invest in these programs or these courses or these events or these, the list is forever long. And I didn't know anyone, so I couldn't refer anybody else to anyone either. And it made me feel like, oh, as an entrepreneur or as a service-based person, I don't belong here. And that's really where the first kind of seed for She's Hungry was planted, because I started to ask myself, what would it be like to create and hold space for people that the only kind of barrier to entry is that you're willing to sit down and tell the truth in your story. That if everything that your life school has taught you, that you're willing to share it in hopes that it can just help somebody else, that it can get us through. And very much, again, what Carrie said about vulnerability, it's that there's so much that stands in between that, especially today when it comes to the curation of social media. There's this, and online in general, there's this disconnect. And to get into rooms with people or to really get to know people. I mean, we are literally one conversation away from a completely different perspective, which could change the trajectory of our life entirely. And essentially, after being met with all of that kind of transactional feeling and that feeling of unworthiness, when I moved out here to Portland 4 years ago, I spent the next 3 years kind of running away from everything that made me not feel enough. And so I was going from job to job to job. I was getting fired. I was this, I was that. I was feeling all over the place. And finally, I landed myself a job that essentially was supposed to be the thing. So I was working for an agency, getting paid a really great sum of money. I had benefits, I had health insurance, I had paid time off. We had happy hours in the office during the week. I had work from home Fridays. Like, it checked all the boxes. At 27 years old, I was getting paid to do the thing I went to college for, everything that you're supposed to want. And yet something inside of me was still missing. It was still not fulfilled. And I tried to talk to my family and talk to my friends. And because at 27, you're asking yourself, like, okay, so I have all of the things I'm supposed to want. Like, what is wrong with me? What is still wrong with me here? Because it made me feel like there was something that was still wrong with me. And anybody that I talked to essentially was like, you just have to get more grateful. Like, you have everything you want. You have to get more grateful. So I developed a gratitude practice, a journaling practice. I meditated. I went on walks. I went on hikes. I did all these things because essentially I thought that I was broken. Like there was still something wrong with me. But what I'm asking everyone who's listening to this today is that feeling you have inside of you, that is the key to success that will literally illuminate the entire rest of your hugely meaningful life. That if you're sitting there and there's something inside of you that is yearning for something more, that is curious about what this path would look like or what that thing, that is put there on purpose. And I say this because if you think of it this way, getting a little bit into science like Carrie did, is that every single thing that makes you who you are, all of the atoms that make you who you are, they do not get destroyed, they only get recreated. And they have been around since time began. And they have made the journey from whatever they were before you, whether it's, I make a joke that it's like they could have been your atoms could have been a drop of water in the ocean. They could have been the atom in the blade of Joan of Arc's sword. You could have been made up of so many things that energetically have made their way to become you, uniquely you, one time. That is it. And if that doesn't make you think that you were put here for a purpose, and that yearning that inside of you was put there on purpose, I don't know what to tell you, because I believe that it is. And for me, after doing all of this work on myself, I was finally, whatever you believe, divinely, universally, like the universe gave me this opportunity in the form of an event that I went to. It was called Awaken Your Practice. And I didn't have a practice at the time. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. But at the end of the day, I knew that there was something inside of me that told me I needed to go to this thing. And I walked in. I was the youngest person in the room. I felt like I didn't belong. Again, I was worried that I was investing my time into something else that I was just going to feel unworthy and kind of shut down while I was there. And I even told myself, like, 5 minutes into being there, maybe 10 minutes into being there, that if after 4 hours I felt like I didn't belong, I could go to the bathroom and I would just leave through the back door. And I can't believe I even said that, but it's the idea that that's true. Like, I was just so worried. But after 4 hours, this is what happened. I found myself on my knees crying, saying for the first time, honestly and openly out loud, that I wanted to be a public speaker, that I wanted to host events, that I wanted to create a community where I didn't ever question whether or not I was worthy enough just because of who I am to sit at their table or to speak at the table. That I wanted to know that I mattered just the way that I was, exactly on purpose, here, now, in all of my glory. And I was not only met with compassion and support, but I was met with, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? And that moment for me is exactly the momentum that propelled me, is the exact catalyst that I needed to propel me in the direction of this podcast, in the direction of She's Hungry, in the direction of everything, because it was one moment that changed the trajectory of the last 2 years of my life, 1.5 years of my life. That one moment where people held space for me to tell my truth. And when we create spaces for people to come together without saying, oh, you don't make enough money, or you don't have enough referrals, or you don't whatever, you're too much, you're not enough, you're whatever, you don't belong here, that we just say, look, you have a story that your life school taught you. And if you are willing to share openly, vulnerably about your experience, with the idea that, like, how can I help? That's what She's Hungry is all about. It is not what do I get, it is how can I help first. Because back in June last year, I held an event, and this is kind of the encapsulating moment of She's Hungry, is I asked everybody in the room, I said, if you are so brave to say what your wildest dream is out loud, can I have a couple of volunteers to say what you could not imagine this ever being your life, but this would just be absolutely incredible. And people volunteered and they said their dream, and I said, how do you feel? And they said, I'm worthy. They said, I can't believe, who am I to want this thing? Who am I to dream about this thing? Like, I don't have any experience even wanting this thing. And then I said, okay, now by just a show of hands, who in this room thinks that they could help either of these two women just take the first step or get started? And so many hands raised up. And these two women cried, their jaw dropped, because we are one scary conversation away. We are one vulnerable moment away from a completely different perspective on what is possible for our lives. And that, I believe, is only possible through true community and true connection. And when we can break down the barriers of vulnerability to realize that we are the same at our humanity and our core, that we were put here on purpose, that we are put here to listen to that place inside of us that is taking us to the place that we are meant to go. I think that we get to do that when we come together and we ask more questions and we get brave with our vulnerability and create and hold these spaces for people to just tell their truth, to drop into their intuition. And that's essentially what I continue to chase and what inspires me every day through She's Hungry and through the podcast. I mean, we have conversations. I started out, and they're called the impossible stories, because when I moved out here to Portland and I didn't know a single person and I still did it anyway, and I'm here 4 years later and I haven't gone home or not paid my rent, people are like, oh my gosh, that sounds incredible. I wish I could do something like that, but it sounds impossible. But here's the thing. It is all about making choices. And we have everything we need already inside of us. Everything has made the trek to make us who we are, uniquely who we are here today. That is the power within us to choose every day the life we want for ourselves, and we can do it together. And so through the podcast, I now hold conversations and have conversations with women who are in business, who have done it scared, so that other people know that message inside of them, that feeling inside of them, that they have the tools, they have the community, and they have the way to do it too. And that is literally what just lights me up so much every day, is the fact that we were put here on purpose. You were put here on purpose, and you have a power that is uniquely your own, that is there on purpose. And that feeling that you feel inside of you that wants to figure out what more is, that is curious about what's possible for your life, that was also put there on purpose. And you are one brave conversation away with a huge community. I mean, I welcome anybody listening to this, to She's Hungry, you are one conversation away from potentially making that a reality. And I mean, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Tiffany Yu is the CEO and founder of Diversability, an award-winning social enterprise to rebrand disability through the power of community. Tiffany also founded the Awesome Foundation Disability Chapter, a monthly micro grant for disability projects that has awarded $37,500 to $38,000 in projects in 8 countries. Tiffany was also appointed to the San Francisco Mayor's Disability Council by San Francisco Mayor London Breed in 2019 and has been featured in Marie Claire, The Guardian, and Forbes, and has spoken at the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos, as well as TEDx and Stanford University.
I love that last talk. I thought there were a lot of great messages from it that really resonated with me. And there's actually something I came across on Instagram this morning, which will help shape my talk, which is I saw this graphic that said, how can I make this obstacle the greatest thing that's ever happened to me? How can I make this obstacle the greatest thing that's ever happened to me? And Aisha in her talk, talked about the fact that you've overcome 100% of obstacles that you've encountered, a lot around living from a place of strength versus living from a place of fear, the whole idea of surrendering control, and then finally, that message, be it because you are it. And a lot of times in my own work, we often talk about, let's not talk about overcoming, but instead reframe it as becoming. So if we go ahead and show the first photo, I thought I'd start with a little bit of an origin story, because it's really important to kind of think about, what are we bringing and carrying with us in our own narratives. So this is a photo of my family. I'm the youngest of 4. I'm the one wearing that stylish red sweater. My mom is a refugee from the Vietnam War, and my dad is an immigrant from Taiwan. And so I am first generation of the first generation daughter of Asian immigrants. And I wanted to bring that up because I carry a lot of those cultural values into who shows up. So there's intergenerational trauma that's happening there that's being carried through the story. There are a lot of different cultural values around how every individual within the family is a representation of the family, and you want to do everything possible to avoid shame. So I may revisit some of this a little bit later. So if we move to the next photo, this is kind of where the turning point in my life was. So over Thanksgiving weekend, when I was in 4th grade, my mom had to actually travel to Taiwan for a business trip. So my dad and a couple siblings and I decided that we would go drop her off at the airport. And on the way home, my dad actually lost control of the car and ended up having like a little bit of a spasm, and we just shot across this empty highway. So it was a 1-vehicle car accident. As a result, he unfortunately passed away, and I sustained, quite a few injuries. So I actually paralyzed my right arm, severely limiting its use to this day. It's known as a brachial plexus injury. And I also ended up breaking a couple bones in my left leg. So this is actually a photo of me and my maternal grandmother while I was at the hospital. So I'm covered up in blankets. I'm wearing this, again, you see the fashionable, I'm wearing a fashionable cast, and the little rainbow part is coming out underneath. But that was a really hard experience, not only because of what had happened, but also because of the cultural values that my family carried along with us. So I just wanted to go over some of those and how those impacted the view through which I moved about the world. So the first is death in the family is very taboo. It means that something was wrong with the family, so someone needed to die. And a lot of these are rooted in, very old traditions. And so after my dad passed away, we actually never talked about my dad again. And to the external world, he was away on a trip. So as a 9-year-old girl, I felt like I really didn't have space to comprehend what had happened to my family structure. But I also didn't have space to grieve and to really mourn this loss, because to the external world, we were presenting a narrative that our family unit was still intact. The second thing that happened was just the trauma of the accident in itself. So in certain Asian cultures, mental health conditions aren't really things that are addressed, because if I look at my mom's journey before she came to America, my parents just worked so hard in order for me and my siblings to be able to have the life that we live. And so why, there was always the thinking, why are you complaining? Your parents worked so hard to get here. And so as a result, there aren't really spaces to kind of sit in that trauma and sit in that grief. So within my family, after the car accident, we never talked about the car accident again. It was kind of like another, this morning I equated it to going to the grocery store. It's just something that happened, and then it was the next day. So again, as a child, not really having space to really understand what had happened and really kind of unravel the fact that that was trauma. And then the third thing that happened was that I acquired a disability. So physical disabilities within certain Asian cultures are very hidden. The child normally is never seen. The physical disability is seen as shame to the family. And the reason why a physical disability, again, in an older school of thought, the reason why a physical disability happened is because something was wrong with the family. And so if I look at everything that happened with this incident, the mental health situation, the trauma, the fact that there was a death, the fact that I did acquire a disability, all of it just represented shame within my family. And so, it's interesting to me because sometimes I look at this photo and I'm just covered in blankets. And I actually think that that is a physical manifestation of what was happening to me internally, with the fact that I just felt like I had to hide everything. And so growing up was very difficult. I wore a sling all the time, which, since my arm was paralyzed, I probably didn't need to. But the sling was a visible reminder to the external world that something was injured or something was wrong. And what was interesting was one of my hardest memories growing up was this physical education class that I had to get dressed for every single day. And it was mandatory for 4th grade until, 9th or 10th grade. And so I'd get dressed for a class every single day that no one wanted me to be at. And every single day, it felt like I was putting on a uniform for what was just, it felt like Groundhog Day. It was just a reliving of the worst day ever, which is no one wanted me to be there. When it was time to pick teams, always the last kid picked. I don't even think picked is the right word to use there. And so that's the environment that I grew up in. It was never acknowledging what had happened, always trying to hide it, and kind of just wanting to make myself hidden, cover myself, want to feel small. And a lot of people ask me kind of when the turning point was when I decided that I didn't really want to live in that victim narrative anymore. And I wanted to take ownership of my identity and my story. And if we go to the next photo, I think a big part of it was really rooting myself in community. And this is a photo of me and a handful of my now friends at New York's Disability Pride Parade. And so fast forward, that car accident happened in 1997. Fast forward to 2009 is when I came up with the first iteration of the organization that I run now, Diversability. And the reason why I started Diversability was a couple things. Number one is I just really so badly wanted community. I grew up feeling so socially isolated, so socially excluded, not having outlets or places or space to really feel the things I needed to feel. And so I just wanted to find some friends. And then the second thing was that because no one ever asked me about my disability, I never learned how to talk about it in a way where I felt strong and powerful in my narrative. I was always talking about it in terms of seeking pity or feeling like a victim. And so when I started bringing and building this community together, what I realized was that, number one, that was the first time that I had ever shared my story publicly about the car accident. So this took 12 years to finally just let this story out of my body. And what ended up happening was, I think the most powerful thing in emotional sharing and emotional storytelling is the ability to look at what has happened to you and validate it. Our stories are so real and they need to be heard. And the second thing that happened when we created this community was the fact that we realized that other people were really yearning to figure out what their own narratives were as well. And so if we go to the next photo, the creation of Diversability has really paralleled my own. So I'm wearing the same splint. It's a little bit faded now. But I wanted to kind of share a little bit about this splint because I wore a splint immediately after the car accident, which looked very similar, this white stuff with the Velcro and the pink lining. And I decided about a year or two ago to get another splint because with paralysis, you'll have muscle atrophy and a couple other things happen. And so when I got the splint, I felt kind of sad because, again, similar to the sling, it was a visible marker that something was wrong. And one of my friends had an artist friend named Forrest Stearns and asked, hey, what if my friend draws something on your splint? And so I thought about what I wanted this splint to say, what statement I wanted it to say. And so this splint, and actually I'll probably show you if you can see it, this splint has a picture of a 9-year-old girl. And so here is her face, and her arm is sprawled across, which you can also see in the photo a little bit better. And she's hugging an elephant, and this is the eye, and the trunk kind of extends all the way down here. And what I wanted that to be was, I felt like my arm and my disability was always the elephant in the room. It was the thing that I felt like I couldn't talk about. I felt like my trauma and my grief and this story was this elephant that was so big that it just wanted to come out and be big. And so I wanted 9-year-old Tiffany to hug that elephant and really be a visible symbol of embracing that story for everything that it is. And I also had the word, it looks much more visible on the photo, but I had the word proud written across the top strap here because a couple reasons. The first is I think about a lot of people who have experienced childhood trauma. And, you know, if I revisit this Instagram photo that I came across this morning about obstacles, for those of us who have experienced trauma or something really adverse in our childhood, oftentimes our outcomes are not as favorable. And I just feel extremely proud of the journey that I've been on for the last 20 plus years of really owning my disability narrative, really owning my trauma and my grief story, and still being a work in progress through those. But then also acknowledging and respecting and valuing the values that my parents brought with me that I carry through in every room that I walk into as well. And the second reason why I put proud on there is because Disability Pride, when we first started Diversability, we had applied for like a little grant, and I had written that I was looking to start a movement around Disability Pride. And when I met up with the grant committee, the decision makers, they asked me what that phrase meant because they couldn't understand how someone could be disabled and proud of that disability identity. And the longer amount of time that I've spent really entrenched within this community, I have become so proud of my own disability identity and my disability journey. And one of the other things I want to mention along those lines is that I think that pride is something, you know, I think about kind of what Aish talked about like living from a place of fear versus living from a place of strength. I think that I just chose to feel strong in my story. And one of the things I talk about a lot is that I really think that disability can be the reason for us to belong, not just the reason for us to exclude historically. So if we move to the next photo, and the last two photos kind of come together, but one of the things I've realized is one of the best ways for us to really celebrate life is through play. And one of the things I've realized is after the car accident, I just felt like I couldn't be a kid anymore. My entire childhood was filled with doctor's appointments of trying to fix my arm, physical therapy, acupuncture, and then of course getting dressed for this class that no one wanted me to be there. And what I realized is that the world can be my playground. And so this is a photo of me in Iceland doing a one-armed plank. And I think what's been really rewarding for me along this journey is the fact that physical activity, I always equated physical activity and my physical education class with the fact that part of my body was disabled. But what I've come to realize is that my physical wellness is not only my arm. And so to be able to, go to Iceland, and then if we move to the last photo, and then ultimately climb Mount Kilimanjaro earlier this year, not as cool as Mount Everest, maybe equally as cool, as we'll see in our next speaker, but I think it's gotten me really thinking about, again, this question. I feel like I keep having to open it on my phone of how can I make this obstacle the greatest thing that's ever happened to me? And if I look back at my life, and of course, I feel like I'm still in my prime and it's still going, but I am just so proud, again, I'm so proud of the journey that I've been on. As Aish said, we have overcome 100% of the obstacles that have come our way. And I guess I want to close by having all of you guys think about what are the figurative and literal mountains that you still have to climb and conquer. Thanks.
Ana Pampa Alarcón is half Mexican, half Austrian, and grew up in both countries. She worked for almost a decade in the advertising industry in Vienna with a focus on high-potential client recruiting across Europe. During her MBA program, she came on a sabbatical to the United States, where she later started the LA-based tech company Find Sisterhood. Ana just launched the latest Find Sisterhood app that allows people to come together and have intimate conversations around topics like sex, mental health, and relationships. She's the mom to 2 kids, Lila and Ezra, and lives in Beverly Hills, California. Today, Ana is joining us to talk about what it means to find sisterhood.
I'm excited to be here. I'd love to share more. I realized my introduction was much more about business, which is also something that I'm really passionate about. So I wanted to start with the first slide, please, Find Sisterhood. So I am the CEO of Find Sisterhood. Find Sisterhood is a tech company, but I wanted to start where it all began. So I was a new immigrant. I was in New York City, and I had my first child, Layla. She's now 5 years old. And I would, at the playground, constantly, people would think that I was the nanny because I speak Spanish to my child. And that really bothered me. So I was a young Hispanic immigrant mom, and people viewed me as, obviously, I have to be the nanny of this baby. And that was really hard for me. And I actually posted on a Facebook group that was specifically for our neighborhood in Brooklyn, and I posted in there basically a call for kindness. And I said, hey, there is a chance that someone might speak or look differently and is still the mom. Let's be more inclusive if you see someone in the neighborhood. And I would appreciate if I wouldn't be made, if people wouldn't make me feel all the time like I don't belong, because it's really hard. I already question whether or not I'm fit to be a mom, because this is really hard for me right now, and I struggled with postpartum depression. But if I leave the house, and I finally managed to leave the house with my child, and then outside the neighborhood, people constantly ask me, but where are you really from? Like, what language are you speaking? Are you the nanny? Like, I think the mommy of this child would appreciate if you put on a hat, or any of these kind of things. This is really hard for me. So please stop making me feel like I don't belong. And it was interesting because that call to action triggered almost 200 women sending me friend requests, sending me DMs, and just reaching out to me. And I started a meetup group, but our meetup group got over 600 members within only a few weeks. And so I tried to schedule meetups, but we were unable to really find locations where we would all fit. And so I had meetups in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, which is where I used to live. Then we had another one in Central Park. We had one in the Bronx. So we had different boroughs in New York City trying to come together. And then I was pregnant with my second child, Ezra. And I was trying to figure out, how can we continue communicating with each other? Because clearly there is a need to meet and to feel less lonely and to feel like there is a more inclusive space that really connects also across intersectional issues. So I interviewed all of the women that were part of my group, and I said, what is it that really speaks to you the most? And what is it that you feel like you don't have? What is the one thing that you really miss? And a lot of the people came back to me and said, well, on social media, everyone seems to always be living their perfect lives. They're all traveling, even their food is #food porn, and their families are #blessed. And everyone is just rocking it. And that makes me feel like I'm shitty at life, and I'm not good at that. And I want to have a space where I can just be myself, and I can say, sometimes I don't know how to be a good parent, and sometimes I have self-doubts, or I'm struggling with body image issues, or with mental health, or my relationship isn't what it looks like on social media. I'm actually really struggling, all of these kind of taboo topics. And so that's how I then started my company, Find Sisterhood. Next slide, please. So this is just a little bit where you can see Find Sisterhood. So Find Sisterhood is an app. It is free. We have users in over 38 different countries. And so I don't want to get too much into that app, because if you want to check it out, you can just download it for free. But I do want to share a few stories about Fine Sisterhood that explain why why being inclusive and why feminism has to be intersectional is so important. One of the stories that I wanted to highlight today is that we had women in South Africa that were talking inside Fine Sisterhood about being raped by their husbands. And there was this whole conversation going on between a lot of different women. And it was very interesting, because then once they had the conversation with women in the United States, a lot of those women said, well, you're talking about marital rape. And the women that were sharing those situations, that were in those circumstances, didn't use those words. And it was very interesting for us to then see how that conversation developed to, okay, there is a term for this, and it's called marital rape. Just because I'm married, it doesn't mean that there is always consent. And also, there is something that I can do about that. There are nonprofits that can help. I can actually report this, and I don't have to put up with this, and this is not normal. And those conversations were happening inside the app. And I think for me, that is one of the things that really keeps me going, because I think that just seeing, if you connect people where it's not about how you look like, what skin color you have, what education you have, what kind of income you have, but just purely on, we all need sisterhood, we all need support, and I need support because I don't feel safe when my husband comes home at night. And another woman saying, I have experienced violence before myself and I want to help other women. Let's connect over that. Let's not connect over any of the other superficial things that we usually put out there on social media. And so that story is really, I remember when they reached out to me, and then they told me, because it was a group of women that collectively left their homes, and then they reached out to us and to my team. And I remember we were sitting in the office and just crying our eyes out, because those are the kind of stories we're like, that's why we keep going. That's why we work so much. And we put everything on the line to make this happen, for exactly those kind of stories. But a little bit more uplifting, as a Latina and as an immigrant, one of the things that I also realized is how alone I am. I barely ever see any representation of women like myself. I'm also a mom of 2 kids, right? So people, like, all of the odds speak against me already when it comes to getting investment, getting from like being a small business to actually scaling a business, to really hiring a team and scaling and being out there. I've realized that a lot of times people saw me as, well, okay, she's a mom, the kids are still young, she's all by herself here in this country, she's an immigrant, so she doesn't have a network. She's also Latina, so a lot of things that I would do in business meetings were criticized, like you use your hands too much, which I do right now as well. And so just feeling again like this not belonging. And it took me a very long time to find my own community that would support me and really have my back. And so one of the things that, as one of the very few people, only 0.04% of any funding in the United States goes to Latinas. And we're the fastest growing entrepreneurs in the United States. So there is a huge disconnect. And so one of the things that I started doing is, because we have funding, because I have a team, because we managed to get this step further that so many others are not able to do, I decided to use my company, not just for the app, for people inside the app as users, but in general to just create that change that I wanted to see myself. And so if we could go to the next slide, there are a few things that my company has now pledged to do and that we're doing for our community. So one of the things that we do is a kindness challenge, where we ask people every week to post random acts of kindness inside Fine Sisterhood. But there is a much deeper meaning behind that. So the kindness challenge could be, for example, I went and I got groceries for my elderly neighbor because I know that they're alone, and so I go and get groceries. But then you post it inside Fine Sisterhood and you might inspire someone else to do the same. So it's a chain of kindness that we have started to create, where we had hundreds of women participating, and then we give away a product. Now for the product, we only take products from companies that are owned by marginalized founders. And that's for us also very important, that in those moments, we also support those kind of companies. 10% of our profits go towards funding other companies of underrepresented founders. And one of the big things for us as well is that we mentor other marginalized founders. So I personally mentor other, especially Latinx-owned businesses on how to get funding, how to talk to investors, where to go, and really how to do it yourself. I remember going to networking events and always feeling like I'm the only person there that is not a native English speaker. So I'm a little bit more hesitant to publicly speak. I'm hesitant to share my ideas because I feel like as soon as I open my mouth, people say, oh, where's that accent from? Where are you from? And it immediately becomes about all of my differences, and it doesn't become anymore about what I am and what I stand for and what are all the amazing things that I'm working on. And I think that if we want to see more people represented on the table, then first of all, especially for us, because we're just not represented at all, we have to create our own tables. And then once we do that, we have to really make sure that we put a lot of chairs around that for people like us and help them up. And so I personally mentor a lot of early stage startup founders myself. I encourage my team to do so. I give my team time during their regular work hours to support and mentor others in our space, because I think that that's really important. Like once you got to the next step, really help others to get there as well, because that's the only way that we're going to create change. And so on the next slide, please. I also just now started, we have a podcast for Fine Sisterhood, but I just now started my own podcast that is called From the Ground Up. And the reason it's called like that is for two reasons. First of all, it's how to start your business from the ground up, but also how to build yourself from the ground up when you feel like you hit rock bottom. And why I think that this is really important is because as founders, as business owners, we're highlighted in the spotlight, especially on social media and in media in general, as these like rock stars, and having a startup is a buzzword and all of those things. But the reality is that it's really hard for our mental health. And there's nothing like having a startup. I have two kids. I had them completely by myself with no support. And I can still tell you that having my own company is 10 times harder than anything related to my children. And like having kids is so hard. And I always thought this is the hardest thing I've ever done until I had a company and I had to manage people. I had sleepless nights. I still work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and doing all of that by myself. And it is just my biggest passion to create safe spaces where we can talk about this, because I think that if we want to have more representation, not just do we need to help them, but then once they're there, we need to also allow for conversations to talk about that this is hard, and not just celebrate ourselves nonstop at how amazing we're crushing it all the time, but also sharing, this is hard. I have self-doubts. I have imposter syndrome. And I have that like every single day. Like today, I see so many amazing speakers and I immediately question, am I good enough? Is my story interesting enough? Do I have anything as valuable to share? Am I too businessy? Am I too techy? Do people even care about tech companies? That's boring. Everyone here is hiking and being outdoors and I'm like the geek. So this imposter syndrome, I think, is something that we really need to discuss more to also break through that stigma. And so on the last slide, I just put my contact information. I am, unlike a lot of you here, not an influencer at all. I'm just a founder, but I do want to help other people. And so the reason I put out the contact information is because I don't just say I want to support people, but I really want to help other female founders that want to get started. And I know how hard it sometimes can be. And we ourselves with my company went through 3 accelerators. We just finished Techstars a few months ago. And I really want to help wherever I can. So if anyone watching this video has an idea and wants to get this off the ground, but they just don't know where to get started, I'd be more than happy to help. And we always have resources in my company, but also just my team and my network. And I'd be happy to open that up to anyone else, because I think that it's important for us women to really support each other.
So before we get going with this panel, I'd like to explain how it's going to work. This panel discussion is to encourage the conversation about diversity, inclusion, and equality, as well as empowering all of us together. The goal here is to unite us communities to have this global discussion. And it's a theme that's been across the board at all of our different women's empowerment events. So I'm going to start to bring everybody on screen. Unfortunately, we can only have 4 people on the screen at once, so all of our speakers will be on screen. I'm going to pop in and out to ask the questions, and we'll have a couple minutes to speak on each of the questions. So we'll bring everybody back in here. Hello, Anna. Hello, Chelsea's coming to the screen. Kate, and then Carrie, we're going to pull you in right after I ask that first question. So the first question today is, how can we ignite change to continually empower women and celebrate equality amongst all minorities or other groups? And I'm actually going to direct this to Chelsea for you to start that conversation and kind of guide this conversation. So again, how can we ignite change to continually empower women and celebrate equality amongst all minorities and other groups?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that it's kind of multi-layered. There's a lot that kind of goes into that. And I think for a person of color, being a Black woman in America, I think that like what you guys are doing right now is amazing. Like making space for every single one of us. We all have different backgrounds. We all have different stories, but like you're making space for us and you're giving us the stage. And I think that that's super important as far as like empowering women. I know for like someone that is adventurous and loves to you know, when you think of like having a community of people, like for example, a retreat maybe in a place like me, like where I live right now in Leavenworth, like not ever have I ever seen a retreat where I would actually attend because I don't feel welcome. Like there are people saying, oh, like you can come here, but then they're not like showcasing things where I would actually feel included in those activities. Like, for example, like my hair is really unique. And so that would affect maybe the way that I would want to adventure around other people. And I think that if you're wanting something to be equal, like you can't just give them a space, right? Like you didn't give me a narrative. You didn't say, hey, this is how you should talk. This is the tone you should use. This is like the way you should dress. You just said, this is the topic. I want you to come. I want you to be empowered. Here's the stage, you know? And I think when you're thinking of like making a community for all women, all groups, everybody, like you have to, you know, give them a stage, give them a space, but also make ways and avenues for them to actually feel included and to share that with other people. And I just think that there's so much to be said with that because, you know, every single one of us are going to feel a certain way. But I think ultimately it's important to understand how to make a certain group of people that are underrepresented and marginalized feel comfortable in a space that you're opening up to them.
I love this so much because especially I loved this question and I feel like I think it required me to like really go deep because there's so much, especially with like this shift that's going on right now and like this huge opportunity that we have. And I'm actually curious. I'm usually the person asking questions because I have a podcast. So forgive me if I'm just a curious person by nature, which is why the podcast is like super an awesome thing to have. But what I'm curious about and what I'm noticing, especially when I'm going to events or I'm having conversations on my podcast and we're talking about equality, inclusivity and things, and just like how to make those kinds of conversations on like, how do we do that? How do we facilitate that? I think that those conversations, there's some fear around getting it wrong. And that is I feel like when it talks, like there's vulnerability there to say, hey, I feel this way. I'm passionate about this, but I only have my perspective. I don't have your perspective. So please educate me and help me. But because we don't have the tools and there's fear around that vulnerability, I think that breaching, like just even being willing to go there, in spite of that fear, I think like there's an opportunity there. but I don't know what the answer is for that opportunity, except for just to be brave and ask more brave questions, and to come from a place of genuine, hey, I feel very strongly about this. I genuinely want to educate myself and be better. How do I do that? That's I think having brave conversations and asking braver questions is my answer.
That's great. Some of my favorite interviews, podcasts that I listen to ask really hard questions. And I think that you're like hitting the hammer on the nail with that for sure. And just saying like, we're not going to be able to move forward, and you're never going to know the answer if you don't ask the question. So I think that that's a really huge part of all of this, is asking questions and bringing people in that are from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different cultures, to be able to answer those questions. You know, if you have like a bunch of people at the top of your company, your business, that are all white, all men, you know, you're not going to understand and probably go down that alley ever of asking those questions, because like you said, it does put you at a vulnerable place, and it does put you just in an uncomfortable situation. So I think kind of diversifying your team, getting people in there like you that are like, I'm going to ask that question, because this is going to be like, I want to know, I want to like pull from this and learn from this. And I think that's super important.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be kind of dovetailing, and completely agreeing, but a curiosity, like a genuine curiosity and a humility. I know that some of the hikes I go on, there might not be a single woman of color. It's something that I'm consciously aware of. And I think, how can I bring more inclusion and diversity into the hikes that I lead? And I think before I can even embark on change and acting on change, I need to acknowledge privilege, the privilege that I have, and I also need to recognize the things that I don't know. Like, there's a lot that I don't know and understand, and I love that I educate about asking. But yeah, there is some fear and vulnerability in that, and so but I also think that this needs to be part of our normal discourse, and not just something that's woven into, regardless of the color of skin or sexual orientation, but just kind of normalizing this conversation, I think helps to go a long way. Like, admitting, saying, I don't know what I don't know, but I genuinely care, and I want to work that one. Help illuminate for me some of the privilege that I may not see, and that's what we do. I know that when we did the Women's Empowerment Tour last year, I forget the speaker's name, but she was awesome. She was very candid. She was beautiful, white and blonde. And she said, I know a lot of the outdoor industry looks like me. And she said, sometimes the best thing I can do is step aside. And that was just really impactful.
I want to pop in really quickly here, because I'm loving this, and we'll go on to the next question for sure. But I'm loving this conversation. What I really love about it is we've talked about a few things here. We've talked about holding space. I think the important thing there is holding space in a way that doesn't, we're not hosting anyone. We're not going out of our way to host someone. We've created space for them because they are welcome. And I think that that is just so important. But we've also talked about what equality looks like a little bit, and what diversity looks like a little bit. We've talked about skin color. We've talked about different things, race and things like that. But it goes, equality diversity is like an onion. There's just so many different layers. And it's the same with, you can talk about diversity when it comes to socioeconomic status, when it comes to history, background, racial differences. You can talk about the size of a person. You can talk about everything, gender diversity, everything. And I think that just creating these spaces that welcome people is just so important. Chelsea, to further what you had kind of talked about there was this imagery topic, and I wanted to highlight that, because as an individual that puts on retreats, the first retreat I used no imagery, because we weren't a company. It was a social media account, and I was just like, who wants to come? And then people came, and that was it. And there was no diversity. There was no diversity for that first trip. And from there on, that was my marketing material. And I actually had to go out to the community and say, help me, because I want to show that everybody is welcome. And that was really difficult, not only to stuff your ego down and say, I'm not right here, I need help, but also to say, okay, who has what I'm looking for, because I don't have it, and is there anyone out there that would be able to assist me? And then that's when actually Anna, your friend Tiffany, came forward with Diversability, and she sent me free stock images to use that had people of all different types of abilities, all different sizes, all different colors, to be able to represent these people so that I can show that we hold space for everyone. In this case, it was for our body course. And being able to recognize when your imagery shows something different is so important. It's hard because once you have that imagery, that's what you have. But stepping out and doing that and opening your doors to that, I think just goes a really, really long way.
Mm-hmm.
Let's dive into the second question here. And the second question I'm going to direct towards Anna, because your conversation today was this. How do we share our cause with those individuals that feel we're not capable, worthy, or maybe adequate enough? What would you say to those people that maybe crack a joke about your worthiness? And I want to say that because of where you started with your story there, but also because I recognize that every single person, every single situation, every single relationship between two people are so different, and that changes how we respond to a situation. But what would you suggest to someone that is maybe poking fun at your worthiness or saying that you can't do something or you're not fitted for something? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, so one of the things that I always remind myself of, and I have to do that quite often when I go into business meetings where I already know I'm going to be treated a certain way, is always how people treat you says everything about them and nothing about yourself. And that is like a big reminder that I always need to tell myself. I get that, many times because of how I dress. I put on a lot of makeup. I think for many US people, I am a stereotypical Latina. And I don't even mean that in a very good way, but like it's that stereotype that they have when I come and I have red lipstick and I have my hoop earrings and I have my high heels and I talk loud and with a lot of passion and a lot of hands and stuff like that. So I feel like it's very obvious when I enter a room in tech. I mean, we're the least diverse industry out there. So many times I'm the only woman. Like, let's start there. I'm like the only woman. And so for me, it's really important to remind myself if someone mistreats me, it's because of their own insecurities and their own upbringing, and it has nothing to do with myself. That I think is really important. And on the other hand, also really getting mentors. I'm a big fan of mentorship, which is why I mentioned that I mentor people, but I get mentored a lot myself. So I have an advisory board for my company, but I also have mentors that are extremely successful and that really help me to just feel like I belong. And sometimes I need that little kick and that little notch that I call a mentor of mine and I say, hey, there's this opportunity. I'm not even sure if I should even apply because all of those things that they said, like they don't apply to me, but I really think that this would be amazing. And then I have mentors that say, Anna, no, you have to do this. You're amazing. And so sometimes really, if you feel like you're not able by yourself to overcome imposter syndrome, ask someone that loves you and that sees you through different eyes to help you. I think that that's really powerful. I think my screen is stuck a little bit.
Does anyone have anything to add? I think that was so beautifully said. I think that...
I'm not sure if I'm still there.
Oh. Yes, Kate, you go ahead. Yes, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I think that when situations like that come up, at least for me and for that experience, it's that, I mean, I have to quote Michelle Obama, when they go low, we go high. Like it's this idea that judgment about inadequacy, incapability, misplaced humor comes from a place of unworthiness and fear. And if we meet fear, which is like a defensive place within us that is emotionally charged, with their fear, how do we grow? And how do we then educate on how to shift the conversation in a way that it does empower people, that we ask more questions, that we get to the heart of like, what are we actually talking about here? And I think that it, again, like I said, from my perspective, when I hear things like that going on, I mean, you have to, on a case-by-case basis, decide, is this person at a place in this conversation that they'd be willing to engage in a higher level of conversation with me about the situation, but also to realize that, again, fear meeting fear, and compounding that situation is not going to be how we grow and how we like move forward in a positive way as society. So I think that it just comes down to obviously gauging that situation. But I feel like so many of us are, again, breaking down that barrier of vulnerability, having this kind of scenario where we are being willing to ask the hard questions, to open the floor to this. And this is the way that that's going to expand upon itself.
Yeah, I love that. I do love that idea of hurt people. And I think though too, it's really important, like you can, without emotion in it, you can have all of these really great tools in your toolbox to remember all of these things. But when you're boiling over and someone says something like that, we as women, we put so much emphasis on being perfect all the time. If you don't always have a perfect response, that's okay. But I think that it's really, really important to remember that you're right. Both of you are right. Hurt people. And if they're poking at you in a way that makes you feel unworthy, maybe there's time and a reflection in that where it's like, are they saying something that maybe I'm doubting in myself? And how can I use this obstacle as a moment to pivot and make it an opportunity for growth for myself, and just take yourself out of the situation? That being said, sometimes I just erupt and get mad.
Same girl, same. Sometimes you're like,
totally
and
fair.
we're down. Yeah. And we're done.
Yeah, 100%. Well, let's keep cruising through these questions here, because I'm just loving these questions. And actually, I have you off screen, Carrie, but I'm going to ask you this question, and I'm going to pop you on to lead the discussion on it. How has the societal image of a woman changed in the past 5 years, and what do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10? And I feel like last year when we asked this, I think you asked this on stage, Carrie. I'm looking down at the screen because I see you're on the bottom bar. But last year I asked you on screen or on stage to ask these questions to our community members. And now you get to answer them on your side too. And I don't think we would have ever expected COVID. So that throws a wrench into it. But how do you feel the societal image of a woman has changed in the past 5 years? And what do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10?
I still think, so we've come really far, but I still feel like we have a really long way to go. And I think we've made great strides in things like body positivity. It's great seeing women of all colors and shapes and sizes on the covers of magazines. But on the flip side of that, I still think there's incredible hypersexualization of girls and young women. And years ago, I watched this documentary. I'm a big fan of it. It's a few years old now, but I think the message still resonates. It's called Miss M-I-S-S, and the documentary filmmaker and that kind of turns the view of the world interviews former Secretary of State, great documentary. is saying that women should dress a certain way or act a certain way, quite the contrary. But still, what are the messages that mainstream media is sending our young girls and our young boys? So I feel like we've come a really long way. I hope that we can continue to push that. I also do worry a little bit about social media and what that's doing to skew our ID. Because we've taken, it's not just photoshopping the cover of the magazine these days, it's the filters that can, change you, not just on the cover of the magazine, but so I really struggle with because I do want to give accolades and pat ourselves, the larger media industry on the back, but I still also think we've got a really long way to go.
I love that answer. Yes. It is a very, very interesting time. I think that we definitely have a long way to go. One thing that I'm actually noticing right now too, as well, is we're kind of in this precipice where it is a little bit, it's a turning point where there's more and more evidence, I guess, towards women and the benefits that we're bringing as well. The example that comes to mind right away when I'm looking at where we were in the last 5 years, and don't get me wrong, we're always moving forward, and you're right, the imagery of women and everything like that is changing exponentially. But then all of a sudden, for example, COVID happened, and a lot of the countries that are doing really well are the countries led by women. And so I think that we're having this opportunity in our history as women where we're showing, okay, leadership and empathetic leadership is a strong point. It is actually a strength versus what a lot of people thought would have been a weakness for a long time. So I think that the next 5 to 10 years, I think COVID has brought a lot forward. I think that it's been a really interesting awakening in a lot of ways. And I think that we're going to get a chance here to really see a lot of change in the next 5 to 10 years that I'm excited for sure.
Yeah.
I was
going to say, I agree with that a lot when it comes to like dropping into the intuition and this this time of just getting clearer. I think when it comes to the last 5 to 10 years, even though the success or the societal image of what success looks like for a woman, whether it's on the top 30 under 30 or whatever, there's still, in my opinion at least, this air of a really successful woman still has this really dominating air of masculinity about her. And that's the only way that a woman gets to be really successful. But I think especially over the last couple of months since COVID happened, but I think even just in the self-development kind of circle that I kind of swing in, it's this idea that what makes our empathy and what makes us who we are is actually the most powerful thing about us. And I think women are really starting to come alive to that, which is really exciting.
Yeah. It's a good time to be a woman, and it's just going to get better. I love it. We'll jump into the last question here, and the last question is going to go to you, Kate. What do you feel is the biggest challenge within the equality movement?
I think it comes a little bit full circle back to my first answer to the first question. I think fear and the fear of getting it wrong, especially when we are so, things are curated, we're on social media, our voices are now heard more or kind of out there and public more now than ever, that a lot of people that I feel are leaders in the space, or you have a large Instagram following or whatever, that they don't really stand a whole lot of places sometimes, at least again in the self-development world, that I think it's part of our responsibility to stand somewhere and to stand with each other. And I think sometimes that gets lost because of the curation of does it fit? Will I piss people off? Will I lose some of my followers? Does this work with my marketing or whatever? And there's this fear of insulting someone or of not of getting it wrong. And I think that that's a challenge, that because not just with inclusivity but and equality and things like that, because that's like the barrier between just being honest and being real with who you are. And that's what I love about the sisterhood, is like that. How do we just show up and be honest about what we believe in, who we believe in, what we stand for? And I think as like social media grows, and whether it's TikTok or whatever, that's like just showing up and telling your truth is like a challenge that I still see happening.
Yeah, I would like to say something to that part. I think that for me personally, equality and how that changes, it has to start, we have to be more intersectional when it comes to that. And so one great example when it comes to equality would be that I am still in shock how many brands that, or influencers that call themselves woke, or whatever you want to call yourself, very open-minded and inclusive, still celebrate Equal Pay Day for women in April. Equal Pay Day should not be celebrated up until the point when it's Equal Pay Day for all women, and that is November for Latinas in this country. There is an Equal Pay Day for Black people, there is an Equal Pay Day for Indigenous people, and there is the very latest Equal Pay Day, which is for Latinas. And so I do think that equality means that we all have to push more for that and call out brands and companies that say, hey, today's Equal Pay Day. No, today's Equal Pay Day for women that look like you. This is not Equal Pay Day. And I think that that, you know, is something that makes people very uncomfortable. I've learned to just say the uncomfortable things, but that's important. Like, that is really important. Or being mindful when you post right now on social media, how you're playing around with your sourdough, and how this is a great time to you know, reflect on things and stuff like that. Like, you're again just talking about yourself, because there are other people right now struggling because they lost their jobs. They don't know how to pay rent. They rely on school lunches to really struggling. And it's really important to say that, like, I'm speaking for myself, but I acknowledge that other people are dealing with so many more challenges. And so that just is something that I think we have to be much more mindful. And I'm not someone who gets easily offended. So I for me, it's sometimes hard to remember, like, be mindful of my own words, because I'm like, oh, I wouldn't get offended if someone says that. But I've learned over the years that, like, that might sometimes really hurt someone. And so just being more mindful, I think that that's, for equality, very important, that we have to have those conversations.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that too. Also being someone like you, Anna, that is not easily offended. And I find myself in this, you know, people always say, you know, like, well, I guess not always, but I have been told that I'm kind of like that, I guess, an eloquent type of Black girl, right? I'm an acceptable type of Black girl, which, like, to me, they're saying it to me as like a compliment. But what I hear is like, you're not accepting all people. I do not accept that compliment. Like, that does not fly at all. And so, like, being more acceptable, and like seeing people on social media right now that are just like putting things out there and then getting like ripped apart, you know, like white women that are claiming allyship and like different things like that. And then they'll post something. I don't know who it was, but someone just like posted a quote that was definitely from like a strong Black woman throughout history. And like, she did not credit the quote. I read her comment.
You're talking about.
Ripped to shreds. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this, like, I felt bad for her. I don't know why. It's embedded in me. I've lived a life fully white centered, like my high schools, my churches, my family, like everything. And so a little part of me felt bad. Like, how do we help this woman, instead of like the only memory she's ever going to have right now is her comments and how many followers she lost. She might not ever actually learn from what she did wrong. Like, I feel like there's a little part of this whole inclusivity thing that we're kind of missing, like that we are all humans. Like, I think it's really important to understand that we're going to make mistakes and we're going to mess up and it's going to be fearful and we're going to be in a vulnerable state. But like, it's important that we all kind of come to this like level playing ground somewhere as women, we're all women from different backgrounds. And right now I'm ebbing and flowing with you all. I'm totally understanding and relating to something that you have all said. And across the board, it's like that we want inclusivity, we want inclusion, we want to see diversity. And like, there's stumbling blocks along the way right now because of the fear that people are going to mess up and be made to look like a fool, And I think for me, being that person that is Black, and I really I want to see this through, and I want to see productivity, and I want to see change. Like, I think we have to come to some kind of like common ground to where like, okay, maybe you put on a retreat and like I show up and it's literally just like, oh my gosh, I don't fit in here. But like, how do we ask questions to get to where we need to be? How do we make brands and companies understand that it's not just about like getting a beautiful Black model, like, and then making her as light-skinned as you possibly can in your photo shoot. Like, it's not about that. It's much, much deeper. It's much, much more embedded into our American history. And it goes back so far, but it's so, so important that we start somewhere and give each other grace and show each other that like, even if you mess up, like you can try again. Like, it's so, so important if we're gonna this. It's really important.
It makes me think of Brene Brown in her book Dare to Lead. She talks about empathy. She's like, we're literally gonna fuck it up all the time, like all the time. But it is part of our responsibility as humans that when you are educated or when you realize that you might have gotten it wrong, to then turn around, go clean it up, and try again. And I think that's like as like, especially as women, when we come together and just to be like, hey, I'm gonna get this wrong, but I want to learn. And I think that's the most honorable thing that we can try to do for each other in the name of grace as humans.
Yeah, I'm even finding like within my community of other Black people, outdoorsy women, there's just this idea that like, there's not enough space for all of us to succeed. So we're not uplifting each other. We're not encouraging each other. We're not finding common ground. And like, that's so frustrating for me to see sometimes, because like maybe it's not me and another person, but I'm seeing two beautiful Black outdoorsy women and there's a disconnect, like there's some reason why society has made us think that there's not enough space for all of us here. There's not enough room for us in the outdoors or on social media or in podcasts, but like clearly there is. Like, there's definitely enough space for all of us to be here. And as women, whether you're Latino to Latino talking and uplifting each other, or Black, Native, Indigenous, whatever you are, like, we have to create space for each other. And like one of my favorite quotes is lifting as we climb. Like, you win, I win, and that's because we're all women here. And it's super important to remember that, like lifting as we climb. I think Mary Church Terrell, she's just has so many good ones, but that one just resonates with me. And I think it's just so important to remember, like, equality is we're going to get there, but as women, like you're saying, it's intersectional. It's all women. We support not just me as a Black woman that speaks this way, but all of us. Definitely.
Oh, yes. That conversation, that is why we do this panel. That was incredible. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. This has been an absolutely incredible first ever virtual Women's Empowerment Tour, and I cannot thank you guys enough for joining me. So thank you. We've got Anna on the side here, but I've just kind of popped in for our final kind of closing moments here. But again, thank you guys so much. You guys brought forward a very tough conversation to have, a very inspiring stories throughout the whole entire event here. And I just can't thank you enough for putting some time aside during these difficult times and including the Lady Alliance in your day here today. So to all the mothers out there that have joined us today, happy Mother's Day. Thank you for making this a part of your day. For anyone that's watching this off of Mother's Day or later on, thank you for joining us and setting time aside to become a part of the Lady Alliance community. And a huge thank you to our partners, Arc'teryx. Arc'teryx has supported the Lady Alliance since the beginning of our tours. They were our first tour partner. We are so, so grateful to have them as a supporting force behind our community. I think the most beautiful thing when it comes to being a community is that we get to vote with our dollars. And if you resonate with the efforts that are being put forward with Arc'teryx or the women that are a part of this community or whatever it might be, when we get out of the situation that we have been in for the last little bit, we get to vote with who we want to come back full force with our dollars. So we hope that your votes with those purchases are reflective of your values, and we really, really appreciate every single person being here today. That's it from the Lady Alliance community. Thanks again. You guys are all super incredible. I guess I don't have to end with my classic line, have a safe drive home, because you're already home. So thank you for joining us tonight. Have a great evening.